Welcome to the first of a series that I'm calling Vivid Noise. Now, why I'm calling it that, why I'm doing this, I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. But for now, this is Hot Wheels Turbo Racing. While this format is pretty new to me, I'm going to structure it similarly to how I would any of my normal videos. And that means I'm going to start with my personal history with this game, and I guess you could say it's typical for a person like me who lives where I do, that being Eastern Europe. I didn't grow up playing this game at all. I grew up watching copious amounts of YouTube videos of this game, specifically Blade and Lightning's playthrough. I think he's called Einstein Shreds now, but back then that's what he was called. And yeah, I was just enamored by this game. It looked so cool, and I was convinced that I would be able to play it because even back then I understood, the difference between there's a console game, there's PC games, and I could see the controllers. So I was like, okay, obviously it's a console game, but it looked so polished, and it really did give off the impression that it wasn't on a console. Now, granted, there's a chance he might have been playing it on an emulator because I remember the playthrough didn't have any reflections on the cars, and that's like a frame buffer thing that Project 64 only recently was able to emulate with like the newer updates. But maybe it was a real cartridge too, because halfway through, like at some point during the playthrough, he says that he wasn't sure which car to pick, I think, so he flipped a cartridge. Right, and I think it was actually an N64 cartridge, don't remember which game though. So clearly, I guess he either owns an N64 or he just collects them anyway. Doesn't matter. So basically that was my introduction, and many years later, I eventually figured out what a Project 64 is, and so I got it and I played it. And so I really just want to talk about why I think that this is honestly a top 5 racing, no, fuck that. It's not even a top 5 racer. It's a top 5 N64 game. Top 5 5th generation game. It is ridiculously good, and it's a licensed game by EA of all people, and to be fair, EA really weren't quite as terrible back then. But anyway, yeah, so first of all, you can really tell this game is, I don't want to say it's like super good looking because it's still an N64 game, but it scales really well. It's aged very well, and I know the developers maybe weren't thinking about this, but it shows, because almost everything here is a 3D model. Very little of the game is 2D sprites like it was very common back then, to the point where frickin' Mario Kart 64 used them entirely for its characters, which might have been the right call actually. But aside from the fidelity, I really need to bring attention to the performance. High frame rates were not common in the 5th generation unless you counted the Dreamcast, because honestly I've always considered a Dreamcast a 5th gen console, even though it technically has hardware that's closer to the 6th generation, but really it was a 6th gen console in a 5th gen world, kind of like how Nintendo nowadays are the opposite, where it's like the last gen in a current gen world, but that's not here or there. Anyway, that's the main reason why I've rendered this at 60 FPS. Since these videos are going to be a little bit longer, I primarily want them to be at 30, but you really gotta see this. It really is surreal seeing an N64 game that looks quite good still, all things considered, running at such a good frame rate. Obviously, the frame rate tanks when you go into multiplayer, but we're not doing that, obviously. So let's get into something with a little more substance, because, graphics, okay, whatever, yeah. The controls, though. This game's controls are ridiculously tight, and I don't mean they're stiff. I mean they're just really good, really responsive, again, thanks to the high performance, and has this really cool trick system, which sort of made a reappearance in a couple other Hot Wheels games, like Velocity X, or Velocity X. I used to call it Velocity X, because it's like a play on a city of velocity, and also Stunt Track Challenge. It's weird, like for a freaking toy brand, Hot Wheels has some really tight games. And obviously there's the recent, Unleashed 1 and 2. Those are good too. I mean, obviously beat that. I made a video on it. But anyway, what makes the trick system really fun is just how free-flowing it is, really. It's not a preset front flip, back flip, barrel roll, whatever. You can just do whatever the hell you want. You can flip your car around, up and down, and all around, right? You can just go fucking crazy, and it's awesome. And actually, you can see there's this pickup I just got. This isn't a live commentary thing. It's obviously, I've done many takes up until this point. So I hope this matches up in terms of the timing when I get that pickup. But that specific pickup, I'll get into the pickups later, it increases your stunting ability, because every car, it's not really a stat in the menu, but every car does have its own stunting prowess. Some are really good, some are, trash, right? That's just how it goes. And speaking of the cars, if you've actually watched Blade and Lightning's playthrough, you might have noticed that I picked this one, Stealth, for the first race, and the next two, you can skip ahead if you want, I don't really care, but the next two I also pick according to the playthrough that he did. Now obviously I don't just want this to be an HD re-upload of someone else's playthrough of the game, so starting from the next part I'm going to be picking my own cars just for, visual variety and stuff. And while we're still talking about cars, I really like the way this game does its unlocks. So, in typical arcade racer fashion, you unlock cars when you complete certain events, yeah, but you also have these mystery cars. Now, it's actually a really interesting mechanic because I'm going to have to test this. I'm not sure if what I'm saying right now is true, but I feel like this is the case. The mystery cars aren't essential for completion, but they do let you get certain cars early. Because I swear, I've completed the game several times without getting every mystery car. I've missed quite a few. In fact, in this playthrough, you'll see me miss a couple. And I'll still have all the cars at the end. And I think they also respawn if you do a quick race or something. So I think they just exist as a way for you to advance through the career faster, just to get more cars sooner than you would normally, so you can get an advantage later on, especially if you're on a higher difficulty. Now, the difficulty right now is a little bit lower just because I want to make sure that this goes smoothly, but trust me, this game can get very hard. I mean, you're just going to need the Twin Mill for everything, which is like the most OP car, or the Twin Mill 2, which has the exact same stats. And now let's talk about the tracks for a little bit. See, just like in Hot Wheels Beat That, this game's tracks strike that balance, right, between roller coaster and actual driving challenge to some extent. They're quite linear, but they do have, a couple alternate pathways here or there, primarily intended for you to get the mystery cars. But something else that the alternate pathways do, and I think is really cool, is the fact that some of them are exclusive, or at least in theory, to a few of the cars in the game that have this inherent 4x4 stat. Technically, every car can have the 4x4 ability, but only if you pick it up as an item. But some cars just have it by default. The game doesn't really tell you about it, but it is a thing, and it's really cool, right? It's the only way I imagine developers intended for you to get to certain parts of the map, because there are no pickups to, find when you're there. So you just gotta have it inherently within your car. And so it's really sick that they incorporated that. Yeah, but aside from that, the tracks are pretty standard in terms of theming. But I do like how they take the standard themes. In this case, you got a desert, a snowy area, and you got like this grimy industrial area. And the PS1 version also has these volcano stages, which are honestly not super well designed. I really don't miss them. I've played the PS1 version. Yeah, they're really janky to play. I mean, it might just be because the PS1 version, but really, they're not super inspired. So I don't miss them. Plus, they're not actually part of the main like the main cup mode. You don't ever go there when you're doing the Hot Wheels Cup or any other cup. So I don't know. I actually assumed the PS1 version came out later and had more content, just to, because you got to justify buying it again. But no, actually the PS1 version came out first, which also isn't surprising because the PS1 was the more successful system. And yes, there was a PlayStation 1 version of the game. I'm not playing it because while it does have better quality sound, obviously, though weirdly enough, lower quality sound effects, which was actually strangely common. You really would think the CD quality audio, the CD system would have the better sound. And yes, the music's better, but oftentimes I find that whenever there's a multi-platform release on both N64 and PS1, in that generation obviously, the N64 version will have the better sounding sound effects. PS1 version will have the better music. I guess, I don't know, to save space because the compression technology wasn't quite as good back then, so obviously. But yeah, other than that though, I just don't really like the PS1 version that much. It just doesn't feel as good. The controls aren't as tight and the performance isn't as good. Generally, I find the N64 games age, it depends on the genre, but for the genres I like, those being racing games and platformers, and I guess shooters as well, because shooters were decent on the N64, GoldenEye and all that. I feel like this system is aged better for that, although obviously for puzzle games and rhythm games, especially rhythm games, because the music, obviously, yeah, the PS1 version is aged way better, and also RPGs. And generally, that's why I picked this version, and also because it's the one I grew up with, as I mentioned. Anyway, speaking of sound, it's, I guess you would say it's not what you'd expect for a game like this, but also kind of exactly what you'd expect, because when you think like cars, racing, it's like, yeah, hard rock. But you think the 90s, the late 90s, you think drum and bass, and this game has both. But like, really interesting examples of both genres. Not generic in the slightest, surprisingly. Well, I mean, it's got Metallic on there. I'm not going to play Fuel in this series, not because copyright, I don't make money off these videos. And as far as I know, Metallica don't like block videos in certain countries, because I know some bands do that. Rick Beato, you know, go ask him about it. But anyway, no, it's just because there's way too many lyrics and it'll get confusing. I'm only going to use the instrumental tracks, obviously. But aside from that, it's got these really, I don't know, exotic sounding hard rock tracks. Like, they're not like your typical Nickelback style fucking Zero Tree 5, whatever, you know, guitar guys know what I'm talking about. Although some of them do have similar tablature. But what I mean is, it's really good. It's really catchy, really well written. And surprisingly enough, it actually translates, you know, well to the N64 sound font. Well, it wasn't written with the sound font. What they did was they just compressed it down super hard. But this is no Tony Hawk situation, especially Tony Hawk 3. No, it actually, like, most of the songs are still intact. They were very careful. They were very careful, very smart with the choices of songs. They picked songs that were repetitive inherently within their writing and that placed their strengths. As in, when I'm listening to them, I don't feel like I'm listening to the same part that's been copy-pasted a bunch of times, even though that is probably what it is, but that's just the sort of sound the song is going for, so it sounds appropriate, and that's really what matters. And as far as the sound effects go, they're really punchy, really clicky, again, surprisingly good sounding, surprisingly crisp, especially all the menu sounds. They sound like tire screeches, little doo-doo whenever you pass a checkpoint. And while recording for this series, actually, for the first time ever, I was somehow able to miss a couple checkpoints, and you got like this really distorted grating sound, obviously. But it's really weird. I have no idea how that happened. So yeah, I feel like that, for the most part, covers how I feel about this game and how I've looked at it critically. It's just a really, really fun racer, and it's just aged so damn well. Like, it's just still really fun to play. This is up there with, I'm gonna say all of the generic answers here for classic N64 games. Mario 64, Banjo-Kazooie, all those. I've never been a huge fan of Banjo, to be honest. And I like Mario 64 well enough just for fucking BLJs and, you know, beams. It's not that fun, but actually, you know what? I feel like that kind of leads me to what I really want to talk about when it comes to this series, and that is why I'm doing it and what it's going to be. See, my channel at this point has sort of become a review type show with retrospectives and stuff, and I'm really happy with those. In fact, I actually have one more that's going to come out, or has already come out, depending on when I get these out, but I've just gotten really bored with that kind of video making process, and ever since I started this channel, I've wanted to do commentary type videos, not necessarily, whoa, look at the tricks on that car type let's plays of that variety, but stuff more akin to, I guess, if I had to compare it to specific content creators, I'd say something like NerdCube's FW series, or the Test series, like any of his unscripted videos, and stuff like, you know, Total Biscuit, RIP, I guess to a certain extent maybe LGR Plays. No, not really, no. I just really fucking like that series. It doesn't actually, it's not the same kind of content that I'm talking about though, but essentially it's a let's play, but only visually. Like, you're looking at a let's play, but you're just listening to me talk about stuff that will usually pertain to the game or something that is related in some way to the game, but it's more so just about having something to listen to. And no, this isn't jumping on the fucking, what was it, videos to sleep to. Like, there's this thing, I think Cat Icarus started, well no, it's the exact opposite of that actually, because typically with those videos what they do is they take existing content and maybe remove some of the louder stuff in there and just, you know, re-upload it that way. This is purpose-made content. That's why I'm calling it Vivid Noise. I actually spent a surprisingly long amount of time coming up with the name, which is, I wanted to call it like Colorful Noise, but Vivid sounds cooler and makes for a better logo, I feel. Like Color Noise, no, you know. Rainbow Noise, I was thinking of Rainbow Noise and I realized that sounds awful. That's terrible. I was never super good at coming up with names, but yeah, Vivid Noise is what I decided on, and I'm calling it that because really I treat content of this sort when I consume it like noise, but like colorful noise. Like, there's something there that you would want to listen to anyway. And now that sounds super pretentious because it sounds like, oh, I have a lot to say that's super interesting. No, I don't think most of my opinions are like not super hot takes, and I don't have that much insight into the industry or whatever. But what I mean is I just want to make something that isn't, just the kind of playthrough that, oh, I just picked up a mystery. Well, actually, I'm probably going to pick it up a little later because this bit of audio is going to be edited. And yes, I'm just going to tell you right now, what you're hearing is not a raw recording. You've probably noticed a couple overlaps already and a couple cuts. This is going to be a very, very heavily edited series. This is not going to be just me fucking hitting the microphone button, hitting record and just letting it go. No, I've been recording for, I think, almost an hour, and in reality, I'm only at minute 15. Well, no, it's going to be like minute 14 something right now, again, because I'm going to cut a little bit of what you're listening to out. In fact, this right now is a separate take from what you were just listening to a couple seconds ago. That's a little bit of insight, because I'm really bad at speaking in one take, and that's the thing. That's another reason as to why I'm doing this series. I've always wanted to have this skill that so many of my favorite content creators have. Reading a script is one thing, and writing a good script, that's hard, and I'm not really sure if I do that either, but I really value things that people can do in the moment. Like, let's say in music, improvisation. That's why I practice so hard on scales and shit, and like to make sure I can play, like if someone plays me a freaking chord progression, I'm like, oh yeah, I can play along with that. Same thing with speaking. Live speaking in this way, and I guess what better way to practice public speaking than speaking in front of the whole internet? And okay, well, it's not the whole internet. It's I'm still extremely grateful though for the I'm over 1,000 subscribers now, and I never thought that would happen. But I'm not gonna let it really affect. I don't want it to affect my decision making when it comes to this channel quite as much. I guess I don't want it to stiffen me creatively, if that makes sense, because really I do this because I enjoy the process, and now I feel incredibly privileged to be able to make this kind of content. Because when I was a kid, I was like, I want to do Let's Plays, but it's like I got 2 megabytes of RAM and no microphone at all. So, in fact, this is actually kind of symbolic, because my first ever video on this channel, if you decide to look for it, was of this game. It was a video I recorded on my aunt's computer with no sound. The performance wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. With like Bandicam, you can see the watermark. Just classic shitty first video. Absolutely, it ticks all the boxes. Well, no, it would have ticked all the boxes if it had sound and was like super distorted and, just recorded through a freaking headset mic or something. But yeah, but now that I'm almost 10 years older, Jesus Christ, because I've been doing this for almost 10 years now, I feel like it's really time for me to make a more matured version of what I want to do, because obviously, I couldn't edit back then. Again, a lot of what you're hearing right now is edited. That's going to be a part of that maturing process. But hopefully, as I make more of these, I will have to rely on it less as a crutch. Now, I understand that if you want like totally polished sound, not editing at all is an impossibility. And obviously, I'm gonna keep putting like compressors and EQ, and I'm gonna just put that little extra bit of polish on there when the recording is done. But what I mean is, I hope that after I've made a couple dozen of these, because it's not going to happen quickly. This is a process that takes years, really, for a lot of content creators. It takes years for them to get really comfortable behind a microphone. And again, I've had the luck to have been doing it for quite a while, but really not in the way. Like, I started a little bit, because I did eventually get like a shitty headset mic, and I did it, and it was awful, obviously. But then I stopped, because I got into this community of people who made a certain kind of music, and obviously that didn't require the same skill. It required a more musical thing, which is very different. That's just, you don't do it in one take, right? You don't. It'll sound terrible. I mean, okay, granted, normal sung vocal music, generally you don't want it to be too chopped up, although it obviously still is. Listen to any record nowadays, any record in the last however many years, and they do like several passes, and then they take all the best takes. Obviously listen to any of my stuff as well, but there was a very specific genre I used to do. I feel kind of embarrassed, I'm not really going to talk about it too much, but basically it required chopping up and overlapping vocals and stuff like that, which is part of the process. So yeah, but it's still very different. And because of that, I just sort of never I lost those years, if that makes sense. I never really developed that sort of speaking that I wanted to. And now I guess I'm using that, using this opportunity as a chance to do it. Really, I've got the name for the series, I've written the little jingle at the start, and I've also written the outro music. In fact, I'm also going to use this as a way to sort of acknowledge the fact that I still make music, because none of these are complete songs. Don't ask for like the full version of the song at the end, because it doesn't exist. I literally just write loops and just polish them up if I feel like they're cool. Like, for example, the one you're about to hear was something I came up with after playing Freedom Planet. I might do that actually on this series, I'm not sure, but I was like, okay, let's try something that's like super anime. So I wrote like a really common anime chord progression, and we're gonna hear it. I'm actually really happy with how it sounds. And apart from that, I guess I just gotta thank you for sticking around. That's sort of the mission statement of this series. I just want to make this kind of content, see how it goes. I just want to improve in this aspect that I've always found very impressive that other people can do, and I feel like this is a great way to do it. And I gotta hold myself accountable. I gotta make these videos and upload them, and yeah, and maybe stop saying and yeah every 2 fucking seconds. That's exactly what I'm talking about. So from the next part onwards, we're just gonna start the series, I guess, proper. No, I'm not going to call this episode 0. I think that's really stupid. It's still going to be episode 1, but this is more of like a preface to what's going to happen. Next episode onwards, I'm not going to be breaking the fourth wall in this way and talking about the series. I'm just going to do the thing that I want to do. I just feel like I needed to get this out of the way because this is very different from what I've been doing up until this point for about a year or so. So yeah, thanks for, I guess, watching. Yeah, or listening. Could be that's kind of the whole point. And see you in a few days, because I'm going to have these stockpiled. See you then.